Let's get more with one of the most respected authorities on the UK economy. Howard Davies is the former director of the London School of Economics. He's also served as Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, Chairman of the Financial Services Authority and advisor to the Treasury. And he joins me now. Thank you so much for coming in the studio. Right, well, not too bad at all. At least we don't have a contraction for that second quarter GDP figure.
Yes, I think we have to welcome the fact that we haven't slipped back into recession. It would have been a royal recession, I think, if we had done, but we haven't. But let's be clear, that's 0.2% in a quarter. We're talking about a 1% recovery, and a 1% recovery is the kind of recovery that people don't feel. It still feels rather gloomy because it's well below the trend growth rate. How much
of the figure will the Bank of England watch? I mean, I know we will get a lot more details in October, and this is just the first indication. So can they really, base their policy on this? No.
Well, Mervyn King will always say it's important not to place too much reliance on one quarter's figures, and the bank certainly has a culture of trying to look at a slightly longer view. But on the other hand, I think it does give some comfort to both those people who want to hold interest rates because growth is not really racing ahead, and also those people who think that the bank should not be engaging in a further bout of QE. So I suspect we will probably see the votes on the MPC stay rather the same as a result of this initial view.
When is the UK actually going to start growing? I mean, we're talking about, real growth. This is the first country within the G7 reporting figures. We're pretty much in a wait-and-see state at the moment. Is it going to be next year, into the second half of next year, that we're really going to start seeing a pickup in the economy?
Well, I'm a little bit bearish, I have to say, about the global outlook, because I think what we have seen is an initial bounce back from a very deep recession. But the uncomfortable truth is that there is still a lot of deleveraging to go. Governments have too much debt, consumers still have too much debt. And I think we are struggling into those headwinds people talked about. We didn't see that initially because there was an inevitable bit of bounce back. But I fear we've got a year or two of below trend growth as we work through some of these overhanging debt problems.
What do you make of the talk by certain government members saying that actually the Bank of England should be a little bit more creative with their quantitative easing? This is really the central bank almost being politicized. Is this a danger?
Yes, I think that's a mistake. Vince Cable, you're talking about, was careful to say this is a matter for the Bank of England. But on the other hand, I think it's unwise for politicians to try to mark the bank's card, if you like. We have done quite well since 1997 with depoliticized monetary policy. Everyone thought when he announced it that Gordon Brown would announce an independent bank and then proceed to tell them every quarter what they should do, but he did not. Nor did Alistair Darling, nor did George Osborne. And on the whole, we benefit from that, and I think we should keep it that way.
In terms of what we're seeing for the future, do you believe that the Bank of England should actually put extra measures, a kind of stimulus either through quantitative easing or elsewhere, to keep the interest rates at the level right now, but do other things to try and spur the economy on?
I have to say I'm somewhat sceptical about how effective that will be. Of course, we don't know whether things would have been a lot worse without the QE we've had. But I wonder whether we will kickstart the economy by a bit of monetary tinkering at this point. I think there is a problem of investment and there's a problem of consumer spending, and I doubt if that's going to be relieved much by a £500 million here or there of quantitative easing. So if I were the Bank of England, I would hold my hand at this point.
But how should, for example, central banks be aware of what's going on elsewhere in the world, so other central bank policy making, and should that have an impact on what you do domestically?
Well, central banks talk to each other quite a lot. That's why they go to Basel for what might otherwise seem dull weekends. But they do chat about how they see the world. They don't give each other advance notice that, by the way, we're going to do a bit of QE on Tuesday. But they do share a lot of impressions, and I imagine those views, those discussions recently have been a little bit pensive, because everywhere you look, you've got the US slowing down, you've got the Chinese trying to moderate growth. In the Eurozone, we've got the well-known problems of the periphery, even though Germany's been doing reasonably well.
And the US.
And the US, is very, very fragile. So I imagine they've all been saying, let us take it steady as we go. And to keep interest rates at close to zero is still a fairly dramatic bit of monetary easing, if you like. So I think we should stick with that. It'll take time to work this problem through.
But how concerned would the Bank of England be if, for example, the fact that it seems more and more difficult that Congress, well, for the moment, we certainly don't have a deal on the debt ceiling, or do they take some kind of comfort in saying, well, if everyone else does badly, the bond market vigilantes punish them, and so the UK is quite safe for the moment?
Well, I don't think they were taking much comfort from that. I think most people looking at Washington are somehow saying to themselves, the Americans will have to do the right thing eventually once they've exhausted all possible alternatives. I don't think anyone can really imagine what will happen if there is a US default. So I imagine that the Bank of England is taking no comfort whatsoever from this and just hoping against hope that some deal is worked out before 5 to midnight on the 2nd of August.
What does happen, actually, if on the 3rd of August we wake up and we have no agreement on raising the debt ceiling?
Well, my suspicion is there's probably a little bit of flexibility in the timetable. I doubt if the Treasury really would stop operating on the 3rd. But if the US government does default, then it will be downgraded, and that will create a new global benchmark, and all kinds of other unpleasant consequences would flow. Yes, I mean, I think the shockwaves would be quite immense. No one can really work this out. It's impossible to model the impact of a US default.
All right, Sir Howard Davies, thank you so much for joining us today.